The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, a show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports industrial complex. I'm joined by my two compatriots, Steve and Rich. How you doing today, gentlemen?
Doing outstanding. We are in the pre-weekend for the Super Bowl, so I'm very excited about the Pro Bowl today, or perhaps not.
I'm doing great, guys. Home alone for the weekend. Daughter and wife are out of town in Atlanta, so I have bathed intermittently this weekend and have eaten whatever I want. So I'm doing great. Looking forward to a good show.
Rich is batching it, eating poorly.
Yes.
Watching TV, doing nothing.
Yes.
I understand.
Are any of us going to watch a minute of the Pro Bowl?
It's not like I get the feeling that people are almost they almost try to be apathetic to the Pro Bowl. You know, it's just, for me, it's like it's not very good football. You know, it doesn't mean anything. So if it's on and I'm sitting there, you know, while I turn it on for a little bit, probably. Will I watch the whole thing? Definitely not.
I'm not going to watch it, but there is a point to be made with that you brought that up, that it, you know, for the people that are complaining that football is too violent and the game will not be in existence, just take a look at today's Pro Bowl and what we have to look forward to. So that's where football is going to head. If with people talking about how violent the game is. So take note, folks. That's what you're going to get.
That's a really good point. That's a very good point. You know, because this is football without hitting.
Yes.
Congratulations, people who want to eliminate the violence.
I saw Ryan Kerrigan with playing dodgeball, and I just couldn't stomach it. So
Ryan Kerrigan, that was that skills thing?
Yeah.
Was that worthwhile? No, obviously not, because you turned it off.
Yeah.
I think all All-Star games are stupid, so we could punt that to another time. Yeah. So let's get into today's topics. We're going to be talking about a different bowl that's not the Pro. We're going to look today at the Super Bowl and the business of the Super Bowl. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the USA Gymnastics Michigan State, scandal. We'll give it that word for now. But first we're going to start off with the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl has always been huge business, especially in the modern era, and the NFL has really built up a lot around it. So we're going to start kind of talking about it as Super Bowl week, which is really, in a business terms, how to view the Super Bowl. Steve, we know you've got some experience at the intersection of the Super Bowl and the NFL.
Yes.
You wanted to give us a couple of primers, greatest hits from your time?
Sure.
Tell us about Super Bowl I, Steve.
First of all, you're older than me, buddy, so, you know. No, I did represent I did do legal work for a Super Bowl, not Super Bowl I. Let me just tell people how it works. You know, I can tell you when I was a fan, you know, watching these things, I watched the game and, you know, you heard about Radio Row, and that was kind of all I knew. Well, what I think people need to understand is that when it comes to the Super Bowl, the game is the denouement of the thing. The game is almost secondary to everything else that goes on. There is an office at the NFL, and the guy I dealt with, his name was Jim Steig. He used to be Mr. Super Bowl. He's retired now. There's someone else doing it now. But they plan Super Bowls years and years out. My role in it was as counsel to the local Super Bowl host committee. Every city has a host committee that starts planning these things several years in advance. It is a takeover of the city, the host city, by the NFL for a week. Again, the game is kind of secondary to the whole thing. There are every NFL sponsor, every NFL player, every person involved in NFL management comes into the city for a week. It is, as Chris said, I think you said this off the air, it is more of a NFL convention. than anything else.
That was Rich.
Was it Rich? Okay.
Yeah.
Rich, as Rich said it, it's almost an NFL convention rather than just a game. Again, the game is almost secondary. I could talk for an hour about this, but let's get your thoughts.
If my hometown, if the Washington Redskins are so fortunate, I will definitely make the trek because, and again, we've been very critical about the NFL on a number of issues, but I can only imagine the fan experience, having an opportunity to be up close with players and your idols and your heroes, your athletic heroes. That's something that's very intriguing to me. I think that also from a business standpoint, it's because you hear a lot of players often selling something or promoting something or some type of business initiative that they have. So I think that is a hotbed to be able to do that. But I agree that the game is just sort of just an afterthought. The average fan can't afford to go, cannot afford it. Probably, I don't think I would want to go to the game, to be quite honest with you, even if my team was in it. But I would absolutely be caught up and enthralled in just the whole spectacle of the Super Bowl. So I'm looking forward to making that trek one day.
Let me give people the general sense of the scope of the reach of the NFL during this week. There is a reason why, for example, you can't find lodging in a Super Bowl city. If you've ever tried and you've wanted to go to a Super Bowl and you've called your local Hilton to be told they're booked, the reason isn't that thousands and thousands of individual fans have booked the Hilton. The reason is that the NFL has, as an organization, has booked every hotel in the city within 100 miles. That is why there's no lodging in a city. On the Super Bowl I worked at, the NFL had acquired every single Cadillac from every single dealer within 100 miles to give away as cars to sponsors, players, excuse me, NFL people. If you wanted to buy a Cadillac during Super Bowl week, it was totally impossible. For example. Go ahead.
So is it fair to say that then in that scenario, the host city is already flush before they actually don't even have to worry that much about retail, so to speak? They've sort of made their nut at a wholesale model and dealing with the NFL.
Absolutely, definitely. And then you throw in the fact that, thousands upon thousands of fans come into the city who know they aren't going to go to the game. It's not just a matter of having, if the stadium, the NFL has a minimum seating requirement for NFL stadiums. I think it was 70,000, I think. Don't hold me to that, but I think that was the number. And it's not a matter of, say, 60,000 fans coming in, to fill the, from parts unknown. They have literally hundreds of thousands of people coming in who are never going to go to the game. And this is why, the cities are so excited about hosting a Super Bowl because, these hotels, every hotel sells out at a premium. Every car rental agency is completely booked and completely sold out. Every restaurant has Super Bowl parties every day of the week for a week. It goes on and on and on and on. Now, of course, the other side to that is hosting a Super Bowl for a city is kind of like getting the Olympics. In the city I was involved in, they had to build some additional rail lines years in advance to get to Super Bowl. I mean, you have to prove that you have the transportation infrastructure, the road system. This is not just let's go have a game and we're going to show up on Friday for a Sunday game. It is an enormous amount more than that, and it's an enormous amount more than people who aren't on the inside really understand. It's very interesting. There are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake for every one of these Super Bowls, and the NFL will, again, they start planning these things years and years and years out, and the guy who's the Mr. Super Bowl now is coordinating with local Super Bowl host committees, probably 5 of them at a time. It is a full-time job for the NFL. If they want to just put on a game, it'd be one thing. But to them, this is the chance they can interact with their sponsors. They make a big deal of it. They can wine and dine people. Rich's description is very, very accurate in calling it a NFL conference.
Steve, would you say that? Would you think that the NFL makes money or do you think they come out in the red?
I mean, I never saw the financials from the NFL for this. Number one, they're spending a lot of money. They make money in the big picture sense because this is how they keep their sponsors. This is when they wine and dine the networks. This is if they want I don't know Budweiser. This is when they wine and dine the Budweiser people. That may be a bad example, but because I don't even know if Budweiser's an NFL sponsor anymore. But they're not making money in strict. They're not making money strictly in hosting the Super Bowl, except in the TV network revenue. It's really more about demonstrating their reach as an organization. And I wish I could just tell you guys everything I did during that Super Bowl week, which I really can't because I'm bound by attorney-client privilege for this. But the NFL, I guess we can say that the NFL wants to become the city for a week. They really want to be in charge of as much as possible to make the event go as smooth as possible. I guess I can say that much.
It's interesting. Well, one, I think it's a smart. We're actually going to be probably more in praise of the NFL today than we are in our average NFL topic day on the show, because I think they do a lot right and smart. And one is, in business, you got to leverage your existing investment. They're going to throw a Super Bowl regardless, right? Like so that they've, and that's a heavy investment on all kinds of fronts, fiscal as well as otherwise. So to be able to leverage something that you're already going to do, I mean, now they're probably at max leverage at this point, unless they want to start expanding into the 2 weeks. But, so you leverage the time where your investment's already going to go heavily regardless of these other things. And then you make all these other things a thing, and you're able to sort of, it's like compound those investments against each other in a really positive way. So the thing that is most akin in the world of sports, I think Olympics is probably the number one. But two, in American kind of professional sports, I think you can see the NBA taking a lot from the NFL's playbook. Now, it's tough for series-based playoffs because you're talking 7-game slogs, right? The whole point is it's a war of attrition. So it's very hard to build an event. But you can see what the NBA's done with All-Star Weekend, because it is one game, it is a flashpoint, and you can see the NBA take the NFL's playbook and replicate that as much as they could and which now All-Star Weekend is maybe, one of the top moments in the NBA calendar for many of the same reasons.
Well, in the All-Star game it's just not as long and it's not as all-encompassing, but it's the same kind of general philosophy. That's the point in time in which because I've been involved in that in a little tangential way too. That's the time they bring in all their sponsors. That's the time they have all the hotels booked, et cetera, et cetera.
It's just a weekend, not a week.
Yeah, it's a weekend, not a week. Like the Super Bowl week starts really on Wednesday. Wednesday is when it ramps up to 100%. Monday and Tuesday, meaning when you guys are going to probably be listening to this, things will get started, but it doesn't really feel like a thing until Wednesday. And then Wednesday through Saturday is Mardi Gras, for lack of a better term, in the city.
Well, what's interesting is just kind of getting back to the fan experience, and we've talked a lot this season about fan apathy for the NFL. But the one thing I think people underestimate about the NFL, and I made this point before, is that it is a social event. The Super Bowl, I've already been invited to 3 Super Bowl parties. And that's not even about the game. It's about the fellowship. It's about the camaraderie. It's about the food. It's a social event. Many people look at hosting Super Bowl parties as a sort of, some people, I won't say, as some sort of social comeuppance or some type of ritual where you have friends to come over and everybody's interested in the commercials and people have all kind of rituals and you have to be quiet during the commercials and all that. So I think people underestimate the social significance and the camaraderie of the Super Bowl itself.
Which that's such a great point, Rich. And it actually, there's lots of angles on that. One, we're talking about the very physical presence of the week for the NFL, but there is also the sort of beyond the game part, which is also all of the marketing not, I'm talking about the commercials. I mean, there's a thing as well, but I'm not talking about the commercials in that first hour bit. But I'm talking about like your Doritos and your Pizza Huts and all of around that party culture means that they all have their own business calendars invested in hitting this time hard and preparing. It's like, you look at the kind of commercial year, there's the holidays, dads and grads, all this kind of thing that marketing knows to ramp up their sales depending on what they're selling. And the Super Bowl, I think, Super Bowl week and weekend is on. If you touch that consumer in even a tangential way, it's part of your yearly planning calendar about where you're going to invest in advertising, in marketing, et cetera, because of what you're talking about. The sprawl, the distributed nature of how much money the Super Bowl generates really does spider out to that degree where there's so many businesses making decisions around this time of the calendar year.
Well, you're absolutely right. Like, for example, I can almost guarantee you I'm going to order pizza during the Super Bowl, and places know that. But, one thing I like to point out on this, which is this may be, too legal mumbo jumbo for some people, but if you notice, a lot of those companies you're talking about, the furniture store will have, Super Bowl week furniture ads. Papa John's will have a Super Bowl thing.
Get your couch.
Yeah, get your couch. Get your pizza. Blah blah blah. Well, they all use the word "the big game." Has anybody ever noticed this? They all say the big game is coming up, and the reason, of course, is that the Super Bowl is trademarked. And what I can tell you is that the NFL is extraordinarily protective of their trademarks. They are absolutely deadly serious about trademark infringement during the Super Bowl. I can't get into it too much, but they are not going to let anybody, from a major corporation down to the guy, selling knockoff, shirts on the street corner. Nobody is going to get away with that during the Super Bowl, and that is why all these companies are so particular about saying the big game. Because the NFL, I've always said on this show that the NFL is an 800-pound gorilla, and this is the week in which the NFL flexes its muscle and proves that it's the 800-pound gorilla, and they will not let anybody get away with, like, zero people will get away with infringing on their Super Bowl and NFL trademarks during Super Bowl week. But in terms of the business of the Super Bowl, like to Chris's point, I would assume that all these companies, like you said, definitely plan for this because there's just so much money to be made off these parties and off the everything, because it's really a de facto national holiday more than anything else, I'd say.
I would love to see, now maybe with the sort of beginning of the other side of the crest of the NFL, we won't see this, but I have long contended that the Monday after the Super Bowl should be a federal holiday. We should just get rid of some. There's so many dumb Monday holidays. We could eliminate one very easily. I'm not going to debate which, but you could find one. We could come to consensus.
We can make everybody really mad and debate which holiday needs to be eliminated.
That would be contentious. But anyway, regardless, make it. That is how big it is in the culture that Monday should be legitimately a holiday, and it would be a fiscal boon. It would only exponentially increase the fiscal boon.
What
of
is
the Super Bowl.
What is the federal government recognizing on your hypothetical Monday holiday?
I don't know, but it's our probably biggest cross-cultural, everyone can do, even if you don't like football, day on the calendar. Maybe Thanksgiving? I don't know. Like, that's maybe one. There are very few times where you have this much, especially in today's culture and society, this much unification. So no one should have to go to work. I was running a teacher professional development. I won't get too nerdy about this, on a Monday after the Super Bowl. And I was there ready, and the guy who had organized came and goes, "Oh, well, we're going to just have to assume half the people aren't going to come because, the Super Bowl." And I was like, it's still Monday. You got to come.
I mean,
to
basically,
work. Like,
you're talking about a free You're basically
process.
talking about a free hangover day, is what it is. I don't drink personally, but I hear you, and it's an interesting thought. But there's absolutely no benefit to the federal government whatsoever about just letting people have a free day off. Why would the federal government want to do? I mean, the purpose of a federal holiday is to recognize an event in history, be it I don't even want to get into debating the federal holidays specifically, but all federal holidays recognize some event or some person. Why would the federal government want to get in cahoots with the NFL to have a post-NFL holiday day?
Well,
because it's a great idea.
and I could actually see, without getting too, I could actually see this current administration actually promoting something like that. But it would be great.
They haven't so far.
Yeah, it would be great. I doubt if they move the Super Bowl to Saturday. But it would be great. I guess the best thing that we can hope for, Chris, is that there's a snow day on that Monday, since it is in February. That would be fantastic. But you're right. It would be a great event. The Super Bowl comes on so late, it goes on so long. If you got young kids, you got people leaving at halftime, then it kind of takes the air out of your Super Bowl party. So it is a great social event. I think the NFL could look to moving it up early.
Well, you know why they won't, Rich? I'm sorry to interrupt, but single primary reason why they will never move to Saturday? It's because Saturday is big, huge corporate party night during Super Bowl week. That's that's when that's the apex of the Super Bowl week experience is Saturday night. And so I think that the NFL and the sponsors would miss having the benefit of that if they move the Super Bowl to Saturday, because then it'd be over and everybody go home on Sunday. Instead everybody goes home on Monday and they have the big party night Saturday. So
you're saying, Steve, that they need their hangover recovery day?
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember, yes, plenty of people coming in with hangovers, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when we were doing all that Super Bowl stuff.
I have kind of a weird theory that maybe you all can shoot down, or we could be sort of interesting.
I will do my best to cynically mock it.
I don't think I don't know. It's not gonna. It doesn't. It's gonna not draw that. You could say it's ridiculous, but this modern version of Super Bowl week really, to me, is a product of the late '80s and most of the '90s. That was where the ascendancy of the NFL in general really kind of took off. And the reality is the Super Bowls during those eras, right? That was the big joke, was how horrible they were. And they were consistently bad. And so the NFL built all these other things up. That's where like the commercials, the TV premieres after, that's where the sort of the ecosystem of the Super Bowl really went through the stratosphere on all levels. Because you had to package a bunch of stuff around for a variety of reasons, but also because the game was a stinker. The games are not stinkers anymore with the Super Bowl, and I've actually found, to connect to Rich's point, a lot of as the games got better, the casual fans dropped off, sort of strangely enough. And now we live in where the game has actually been, in the last 10 years, has actually been the centerpiece. It's actually been the turkey on the Thanksgiving table in a way that it wasn't for a very long time.
For the fan, yes, but for the NFL, not necessarily.
No, from the business standpoint, but it's interesting that a lot of that stuff was built up in an era where they had to hide the crappiness of the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good thing about the Super Bowl is the for an NFL player to win a championship, and maybe this is just not limited to the NFL. But for a player to win a championship, that opens up all kind of opportunities. That kind of etches you. That kind of gets you one step closer to, for some players, the Hall of Fame. So there's a lot at stake. The beauty of the NFL is that it's one game. It's not a championship series. It's one game, 4 quarters, balls out, and the brawl for it all, I guess. And There have been some really good games, and last year, I can also think of years of in past with the Rams and Titans. A lot of really good games, but I don't know if those games necessarily add to allow those people that normally may not like the NFL to say, oh wow, now I've got to watch all 16 games next year.
No, probably not. I mean, they're going to watch the Super Bowl and they'll go, "Oh, what is an exciting game!" I actually have a theory about why this has happened. I think part of the reason why these games are better is we've had so many repeat participants in the Super Bowl. I mean, even the Patriots alone have been to. Is this the 8? I think this is number 8 for them, right?
Yeah, 8.
Yeah. Um, they're very experienced in this. The Giants have been to a couple. The Saints have, been,
Packers.
Packers. I mean, there's so many. The Colts went to a couple. I think their teams are so experienced now that they're not going to get overwhelmed by the week. Because I'm just telling you, it is an overwhelming amount of distractions, right? Particularly to be a Super Bowl team in the Super Bowl city for an entire week. There are so many things going on, and so many people and so many companies want to get a piece of all these players. As an example, what these teams usually do is they will have an early week hotel where they are at, and then Friday night or Saturday they will move to a game day hotel. And the reason they do that is that by the time the week rolls around, everybody knows where the team is, and so they have to move again to get away from it, to have a little bit of isolation when they really start to focus on the game. So my theory to what Chris is saying is, I think these players are just much more experienced now in working through the distractions, because so many of them have done it a lot and many times. That's my theory on it. And the other thing is, I think the Super Bowl week gets bigger and bigger every year. I would assume like Super Bowl 17, Redskins versus Dolphins probably wasn't half the monstrosity that it is today, for example.
I think you could probably make an argument that the 91 Super Bowl week was exponentially huger than the Skins experience in 82.
Well, I think you can kind of put the I think you can tell by the halftime shows. In part, because the halftime shows for the Super Bowl used to not be a big deal. They might have it wasn't, Justin Timberlake. It was,
Up with People.
Yeah, it was an Up with People thing. I think the big performers probably really started with Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I think it was the first major performer, and now, the Super Bowl halftime show has become a multi-million-dollar thing in itself, where the NFL is trying to bully major artists into the artists paying the NFL for the honor of being in the halftime show. I mean, the NFL a couple years ago tried to bully the halftime candidates into giving them a piece of post-Super Bowl touring revenue, which they all said no, screw you to it, of course, which they should.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Go ahead, Rich.
The ultimate pay-to-play scenario. Musicians.
We haven't really touched on this, but there's something that I heard is that it also depends on the city. So from what I heard, and see if you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's this big debate on whether Super Bowl should be only in warm weather cities, San Diego, LA, Florida, Texas. But I actually heard someone say that Jacksonville was actually like the worst city to host the Super Bowl, because everything closes up and it's the sort of the local laws are very not very friendly to the nightlife.
Well, it was that, and they didn't have the logistical infrastructure to handle it. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the hotel rooms. They didn't have the infrastructure to properly handle it. Because again, I just can't emphasize enough. This isn't 60,000 of 70,000 people coming in for a game. It's hundreds of thousands of people coming in who stay most of the week and then leave before the game. And so in Jacksonville, they had people staying on boats. I
do remember that.
In the water, and the reason they did that wasn't sort of like a unique Florida thing. It's because they literally did not have the hotel space anywhere in Jacksonville. Like my city is much bigger than that, and the NFL was still going to, Cadillac dealers 150 miles away, for example. Jacksonville just doesn't have any of that, and that's why, more than anything, that's why Jacksonville was such a bad host city. Is they just logistically were totally unprepared for it. Not through a lack of effort, but just Jacksonville is what it is,
It's actually the flip side of that is interesting to me too, because I don't think it was a failure, but I think that the New York City version of this, I don't see them rushing back to New York City or even some of the cities of that size, because it almost becomes too big for some of the same reasons that you're talking about, Steve, that they actually can't control as much things in a city the size of New York. So now you do have proximity to media, and lots of the positives are obviously there, but it's so big that 3/4 of the city can not care.
I think you have a
right?
good
Or
point with that. And I've not heard this specifically or anything like that, but the NFL wants to be the story. It wants to be the only game in town. The NFL almost wants to be the government for a week. And I'm exaggerating only a little bit when I say that. And in New York City, there's so many things going on. I think you're exactly right. And the other thing is the weather. The weather is a big deal, and it's not just because of the game. It's that if you have a major snowstorm during Super Bowl week, that really puts the kibosh on a lot of these activities, and and that's not what they want. They want these people to be out and have fun and go to the events and go to the parties and go to all these things. And if you've got a foot of snow on the ground in a blizzard, like one of the other terrible Super Bowls was Dallas, and that was because they had a massive ice storm. And the city of Dallas, because it's Texas, was utterly unprepared for it, and that really put that hurt the event overall because they were unprepared for the weather. So it's more than just the game. It's way more than just the game. The game, they can make football players play in the winter weather. It doesn't matter. It's all the other stuff is why they want to have a sunny Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'd love to watch a snowy Super Bowl from. That'd be fun from a game perspective. Right. So, and we haven't even talked about it too much. We've a little bit. We don't have to get too deep into it, but it's also the ramifications for the broadcast are huge as well. I mean, obviously we all know about the price tag on the commercials, et cetera, et cetera. But this is where max eyeballs are on TV. It's still, it's still the number one water cooler viewing experience in the country statistically. And so the amount of good and kind of getting into the black this does for the host network and even think about all the things that people counter program. Think about the Puppy Bowl and think about Lifetime Network debuting a chick flick, right? Like all of broadcast media, makes as much hay as they can out of this time. One of my favorite things is to name your favorite TV show that debuted after the Super Bowl. And I have an internal debate because I have two answers. Be curious to hear if you all have one.
Say that again.
Your favorite TV show, because debuting a new TV show or a very special episode's a big trope. So I think there's two all-time great shows that debuted immediately after the Super Bowl. See if you can guess them.
24.
That wasn't on my list, but that's actually a great one.
That's the only one that's coming to my head, straight off the top of my head, is 24. Rich, do you know the answer?
No, I just remember In Living Color, this little sketch comedy show back in '91.
That was the counter programming, yeah.
Yeah, they would actually literally have an episode like the
halftime, right?
Halftime.
Yeah. So 24 is a great answer, which I hadn't thought of. But the two for me are the A-Team.
Oh, you're going back a ways now, man.
Yeah. Debuted immediately after Super Bowl, and this one's staying in a similar Wayback Machine, The Wonder Years.
The Wonder Years was a Super Bowl premiere? Wow.
Wonder Years was a Super Bowl and a hit. Like if it had just debuted on a random Thursday in March, it may never have gotten the push. Like it was a good show, so it would find its audience, but that slot, it was a hit from epised one after the Super Bowl.
Let's close the Super Bowl topic with this because you brought up ratings. Go ahead,
Before you close, I have one thing to say about this. So just really quickly, if you have a Super Bowl party, you cannot have a TV. You cannot have a 42-inch TV. There has to be a certain inchage. That's not a word. A certain inchage of TV if you're going to host a Super Bowl party. Nothing less than 65. So if you want everybody to crowd around a 42-inch flat screen, please don't invite me. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
60 is not enough?
60 is not enough.
Because I have a 60. Okay, I guess you won't come to my house for the Super Bowl week.
I think we have a show title for this one. 60 inches isn't enough.
There you go. Somebody remember that. Okay. I have in front of me a list of, and this is courtesy of Wikipedia. Don't at me. This is not a scientific study. I have in front of me a list of the top 20 most watched television broadcasts in United States history. Number 1, can you guess? I can tell you that 19 of the 20 are Super Bowls. Can anybody guess the one program that is a non-Super Bowl on the list? And then can you guess the top-rated Super Bowl ever?
All I know is that the only thing that it may not make this list, but that comes close to it in terms of eyeballs one night is in spitting distance is usually the Academy Awards.
The Academy Awards is not on the list. Rich, you have an idea?
Let me see, we're talking February. Is it, it's just some crazy thing popped in my head. I was thinking something around the Gulf War time in 91, around that time, 90, 91.
Nice guess, but that's not it.
Okay.
The one thing that is on the list is the series finale of MASH, which goes back to 1983.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I did watch live.
That was a little before my time, but I've watched it subsequent to that. Yeah, that had 105.9 million viewers. The top-rated Super Bowl, can anybody guess that? You want to take a stab, or do you have no idea?
Oh, what game it was, or what the numbers were?
No, the game. Which game was the top-rated Super Bowl ever?
And
I'll give you my hint. My hint will be it's a fairly recent one. There's my hint.
Giants, Patriots.
No.
Good guess.
Yeah, it is a good guess.
Yeah, I don't know if that's not it. I don't know if I would. I mean, I'll say the Patriots are in it. I'll take it.
No, I just clicked it off. Okay, yeah, no, the the top-rated Super Bowl ever was 2015. It was Patriots, and it was the Seattle Seahawks.
12th man showing up, I guess.
2015 was the February 2015. That was the one that the Patriots won. When they intercepted Russell Wilson at the goal line.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Because they didn't
Malcolm
run
Butler.
beast mode
Yeah.
from the 1 yard
Malcolm
out.
Butler, right. 114.4 million viewers in the U.S. So there you go.
Wow.
But my point
right.
is, to demonstrate the reach of the NFL, 19 of the 20 top-rated broadcasts in U.S. television history are Super Bowls. MASH is the only one that even is in the ballpark.
Yeah.
All right, so... Oh, go ahead, Rich.
I was just going to say, I think it's also going to be a record for most. I've seen more flea flickers in the last 2 weeks of the NFL season than I've seen in the last 10 years.
They ran one in the Senior Bowl, didn't they, yesterday? Or what? No, it was a hook and ladder. They ran a hook and ladder in the Senior Bowl. Yeah.
You almost got the feeling we're getting too nerdy on the games, but you almost got the feeling that the Patriots did one last week against Jacksonville just to show them how it's done.
Right.
Like that wasn't in the game plan, but okay, that theirs was laughable. We're gonna show how a real team runs a flea flicker.
Right.
Real quick, let's not give a big analysis, but give predictions on the Super Bowl. I'll go first. I think, I have a really hard time betting against the Patriots. I hate the Eagles, but that aside, I have a really hard time betting against the Patriots in the Super Bowl anymore. Experienced team and experienced team. So I think the Patriots are gonna win a fairly close game.
I think the Patriots will win, but I think it's going to be intriguing because the Eagles know how to pressure the quarterback, and that's the only way you have a shot is to get pressure up the middle on Tom Brady. But Nick Foles can't win a Super Bowl.
There you go.
So, yeah, no one ever got rich betting against the Patriots, so I'm not, that's ridiculous. And the reality is that the Patriots don't dominate Super Bowls, right? They got, that Seattle game, last year. They're often fairly close contests, as dominant as they've been as a dynasty. They actually, they actually play pretty tight Super Bowl games. So I think it'll probably follow that script with the Patriots doing something in the last 5 to 7 minutes that continues to cement their legend. So having said that, I'm actually going to take the Eagles just to be interesting. It's pretty scary what they were able to do to the top-rated defense in the NFL with Minnesota Vikings last week. And the Patriots defense is actually not good. It's actually less than average. Now, they always ramp up their play when it matters. I get that. But it gives me pause that you can see a Nick Foles-led offense do what they did last week to the top defense. Now, do they blow their load? Probably, but I think the Patriots have their hands full defending that offense.
I think that Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl, retires, and Kirk Cousins is your next quarterback of the New England Patriots.
You heard it here first,
Okay,
Rich. No, I think Rich.
that's the hottest of hot takes.
Rich is Rich is serious.
I'm telling you. Because if you remember, you don't remember this, but remember when the Redskins and the Patriots had their joint practice?
Yeah.
There was a quote out of Ashburn, and that the Patriots felt that Kirk Cousins was the best quarterback on the roster.
That was back when Griffin was the starter.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
And all the bunch of Patriots players came out and anonymously and otherwise said that. Yes. So you heard it here first. Everybody's going to owe Rich $1 if that actually happens. So mail it in, courtesy of the Hogsty.
Scorching hot takes with Rich.
Yeah.
All right. All right, this is gonna be not an easy transition, but we're gonna kind of move away from sort of the levity and the celebratory holiday type spirit that circles the Super Bowl and all of its ephemera, and talk a little bit about the deep, widespread sexual abuse scandal going on in USA Gymnastics, and then more importantly, probably for this show, looking at Michigan State University and the broader culture of cover-up, of systemic protection of these kind of abuses. This is not a lone wolf scenario in terms of what's empowered this to gone on for so long. So we're going to transition into that discussion. This is a very, this story is one of those stories where you've got details and news kind of being generated on a daily basis. So we understand that it's a lot to keep up with. We'll look more at the sort of systemic ecosystem that made this happen, and probably look a little bit at what this is doing to Michigan State University as a sort of home for this. And obviously not discuss too much the details of the abuse. Or focus on that aspect of it, although it's very hard to separate. So there's our introduction. Who'd like to start us off?
Okay, here's the point to me. It's hard to frame. It is not that unbelievable to me that Michigan State University has very clearly protected athletes from sexual assault and rape allegations in order to protect the integrity of the football team, the reputation of the football team, and the basketball team in the institution. It is very sad, but that is what's happened, and Michigan State University and probably others, certainly Baylor University and certainly Penn State University. It is not surprising to me that victims have been shamed, victims have been ignored, all in the name of protecting the cash cow. USA Gymnastics, what has gone on with USA Gymnastics dating back decades is horrifying. And that is not so much a case of protecting the money as it's just gross incompetence on the part of the United States Olympic Committee and USA Gymnastics. It is a very personal topic to me, not because I'm affected by it, because I'm just more horrified by this than most other sports stories that I've ever come across. I do think that the NCAA needs to shut down Michigan State athletics as a whole, as an institution, for a number of seasons and let them rebuild the entire institution, because I do not think that Michigan State University has demonstrated that they can competently participate in intercollegiate athletics at this point. So I think they won't. The NCAA is incompetent when it comes to this stuff, but I think Michigan State needs to be shut down. Thoughts?
Well, the part that really eats at me is just the length of time that this has been allegedly taking place, and just think of how many people are culpable and complicit in this whole thing. I don't think we've even peeled back the onion on this, just the depth of what is being encountered here. And of course, there are going to be people that are going to take the fall, but I don't really know with something like this of can you ever really find out all of the key players that have been complicit in this monstrous these monstrous actions? And it just says something about, it's deeper. I think it has a moral there's a moral piece to this, that abuse can go on for so long, and people are willing to put money ahead of people's psychological and physical well-being, because the effects of sexual abuse have such a psychological toll that people don't even really understand. I mean, these women, I mean, how do they regain their lives? I mean, you know, some probably deal with it better than others, but it can have far-reaching implications just in terms of the damage that has been done. I also wonder, I can't help but there's some parallels between this and the Penn State. And if the NCAA cannot shut down Penn State, then I have no confidence that they can shut down Michigan State.
Well, you just said can. They can shut down Penn State. They chose not to.
Right, correct.
Yeah. Now, you know, Penn State University received a $60 million fine. They received a 4-year bowl ban, and they lost 10 scholarships per year for 4 years. That was the price they had to pay for, at worst, sanctioning the rape of little children on campus at the football facility by Jerry Sandusky. Under those circumstances, Penn State was allowed to continue to play football, and that is grossly offensive to me as a human being. I have never forgiven the NCAA for that, and to this day I won't root for Penn State for any reason for that. You know, I would be willing to bet that they could raise $60 million in a year or two from their athletic boosters, and they probably did. And probably the $60 million fine for an institution as big as Penn State is in some ways finding, you know, dollar bills under your couch for you and I. And they were back in the national championship picture this year, so obviously it's gone, and their fans, who ought to be ashamed of themselves, also are past it, and it doesn't matter. Michigan State University, on the other hand, had a doctor who raped at least 150 children, and some athletes, Michigan State gymnasts and others on campus at Michigan State. The football team, as defined by ESPN this week in print and in their ESPN 60 for 60, detailed allegations of systematic victim shaming by Michigan State University, ignoring victims, protecting football and basketball players, on top of the Larry Nassar thing. So I can't for the life of me see why Michigan State should be allowed to continue participating in athletics. But like Rich, I have zero confidence and zero faith that the NCAA will actually do that, because it's all about money. It's all about millions of dollars in Big Ten revenue that nobody wants to stop. So if they can do as much as they can to shuffle the victims under the table, they're going to do it, which is very sad.
I would stand up and applaud if the NCAA gave some kind of lifetime, short, midterm ban, did something at that level, like some version of the, you know, that kind of level of penalty. They won't. So I'm not going to disagree with the two of you here. In fact, I predict that we will be talking about a Tom Izzo March Madness run sometime, maybe this year, but sometime within the next couple of years, and this won't even be mentioned in the coverage of another Tom Izzo Michigan State Final Four run.
And listen, Izzo is
grade 8 or whatever.
Izzo is personally involved in this, you know, because Izzo had players that were accused of rape. And he had one of those players as an assistant coach after that player graduated. And it was only after the thing broke nationally that they finally had to get rid of the guy. And as far as Mark D'Antonio, who's the head coach of Michigan State University football team, he's been defiant. He has refused to acknowledge the problems that Michigan State itself has finally acknowledged. Why he still has a job to this day, you know, right now I have no idea. They both need to be fired. Izzo included, above and beyond the ban that we all know won't happen. But we know that Tom Izzo in particular will I mean, I say Tom Izzo won't be fired, but we just saw Louisville, help me, who just
Patino.
thank you, Rick. Yeah, Patino just got fired, so maybe Izzo will too. He certainly deserves it, as does Mark D'Antonio. I have my doubts that that'll ever happen, because I think if you gave Mark Emmert and his cronies at the NCAA truth serum, I think the truth of the matter, really above and beyond everything that they would never admit to the public, is that they care more about the money, and they care more about keeping the prominence of college football and basketball than they do about the victims and what their athletes have done. That's what I really honestly think.
I don't disagree. The only ray of hope that maybe is that we're in a much different cultural place with these topics than we were in some of these other times, and so you could make a case that that tidal wave sweeps us up in ways that we would not previously either have seen or would have guessed. So there could be. I refrain from the Z word, but there's a piece here that could be a play that hasn't been a factor previously.
The zeitgeist.
The zeitgeist.
Yeah, I mean, it's not funny, and I hate to laugh about it, but one can only hope that's true. My guess is that the NCAA will. They have announced finally that they are investigating Michigan State. The NCAA is historically really bad at investigations. They've never proven they can competently investigate anything. On top of that, they don't have a power of subpoena. They don't have the power to obtain a warrant. They're not a law enforcement agency. My guess is that they drag their investigation out a year or two, as long as they can, and hope this issue kind of goes away. And then they're gonna fine. They'll give Michigan State a fine, and the boosters will pay it, and everybody will be happy.
I just wonder though if the thinking is. If the thinking is that, okay, this is bad for now, as you mentioned, we'll just pay a hefty settlement and it goes away, and that in their mind says we're not totally admitting wrongdoing. And when you talk about sexual abuse, if I'm the victim, and this is easy for me to say, but if I'm the victim, I wouldn't take one dime, because to me, it's bigger than money. And if you can't buy me, and you can't buy my silence, then that speaks volumes. And sure, a few million, 5-10 million a piece, when you're, I don't know how much money, these young ladies make or could make. That could change their life, but for me, there's no amount of money that would I would not accept a dime of any money, any payout.
Well, let's be clear about one thing about this. If there isn't already, there is about to be a class action lawsuit against Michigan State University. Larry Nassar has been sued civilly, and there's no doubt in my mind that Michigan State will be sued in class action form if they haven't already. I don't know what the NCAA would do with a big fine. I don't know what the NCAA did with the $60 million fine that Penn State paid. If they gave it to the victims, if they kept the money and gave it to charity, what? So there's going to be civil financial penalties that will be paid by Michigan State University above and beyond whatever the NCAA does to them. At some point, the courts can't go back and erase time. The courts can only award monetary compensation in exchange for the loss that you suffered. And that's just kind of the way the justice system works in a civil sense. Justice, I think, for these people would be to see the athletic program stopped. All these people who did this and who sanctioned this and who didn't follow federal reporting guidelines and who covered up investigations to protect the football team. Justice is to see them lose their jobs and to see the program shut down. That's justice to me. So,
this one thing we can't escape here is that we see these kind of scandals, and they're the most pervasive, and they are driven often by the very same motivations. I'm not saying the crime themselves. I'm saying the cover.
Right.
They exist in large systems that are a distributed network where the nodes in that network have more invested in the continued health of the system than they do of the victims, and they can cordon themselves off by that. That said, now, so you look at these biggest scandals, and I'm sorry, I'm going to offend people. You're welcome to at me, but the biggest example, I'm not making this up, is the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So large systems where the individual nodes in that system can rationalize putting the long-term success and whatever good that system does over, and then thus they cover up and they can be complicit in that. These things happen in big systems: academia, schools, institutionalized church, governments, places where you have enough people whose allegiance is to the system and can rationalize a way that the overall system's health is better for society than these scandals coming to the light of day. And you see it time and time again. This what goes on and what people do at those systemic levels to cover this up is the exact same motivations, the exact same actions, move people around, the shaming, all of that. It's almost textbook. You can, anytime there's this kind of level of scandal, the actors do the same thing for the same reasons.
And the Catholic Church did everything you're talking about. I mean, the not this current pope, but the prior pope, Cardinal who was John Ratzinger when he was a cardinal. I can't remember his pope name. He was the one.
Gregory, maybe?
I can't remember, and I don't even want to know his name because he was directly involved in the cover-up. In the Catholic, he was running the cover-up. He was the guy who was moving priests around and everything else. And that's a whole other rabbit hole I don't want to go down. But, yeah, that offended me too. What I wanted to address, and we probably need to wrap this up at some point, but, the common criticism, I thought Penn State should have been given the death penalty. I thought Baylor should have been given the death penalty. Baylor covered up gang rape, and they had a murder on the basketball team several years ago. The common criticism I always hear from people is that the death penalty hurts current athletes who had nothing to do with it. And to that I say, you know what, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but that you're going to get caught up in it. But there's a bigger societal issue at play here. And the fact of the matter is that if you were good enough to play at Penn State, Baylor, and Michigan State, you're good enough to transfer somewhere else to continue your athletic career if you want. Have the NCAA waive the 1 year penalty, the 1 year sit-out penalty, or if you want to not play anymore, keep your scholarship at those 3 universities and finish your education. But at some point, the NCAA needs to put its foot down and bring the hammer down on one of these schools to stop what's happening. And if a few students get caught up in it, we'll do our best to accommodate those students and allow them to continue their athletic career somewhere else. That's the only thing that's the only answer I have to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I had completely forgot about Baylor. So, I mean, that just was,
all Baylor did is fire out Briles, and they escaped scot-free from any punishment whatsoever.
Yeah.
They blamed everything on
And he's
Briles.
being talked about for new jobs.
Of course, because he's a good football coach. And so forget about everything that's happened. Let's just have him run another big-time football program and see who else he can hurt.
Yeah. Yep. But, I think that this, the question then is, does this help change anything moving forward? Are other programs that are covering other programs where these things are actually going on and there's probably some cover up, or does this have them shaking in their boots? Not
if all Michigan State just gets a fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
If Michigan State gets a fine and loses some scholarships and, oh my God, they can't play in the Rose Bowl for a few years. It's going to move on and nobody's going to care.
I think
they get the death penalty, yeah, they'll care.
The only thing the thing that I've been really thinking about, before I say this, I'm in no way implicating this person at all, but eventually someone's going to ask Magic Johnson about this, and he is their face. He's their face of their alum. He's on TV all the time at the tournament, and I'm curious to know how prolific alumni of these programs that are being with Penn State alum, but and Michigan State alum, how they will address this.
I mean, one can only guess what Magic Johnson will say. He did not play for Izzo when he was at Michigan State. That was before Izzo's time. I would hope to think that Magic is savvy enough to cut a conciliatory tone at a minimum, not be defiant about it.
Right.
But one can only guess. I mean, the bulk of Penn State alum that I saw were sort of openly defiant about the allegations. Which is a very sad thing to me. So who knows what Magic's going to say? I'd like to think he's smart enough not to act like that.
Probably.
Nobody's asked him as far as I've seen so far.
Yeah.
Well, March Madness, he'll get asked.
Yeah.
I think he'll do what often happens in these cases as another sort of part of the big system and how some of its most recognized stakeholders react. They defend, and they can defend in a conciliatory way, right? They can, I'm respected the victims, this is horrible, I think change should happen, but it'll be a hashtag not all Spartans, right? Not all Nittany Lions. It'll say, in the defense, you can't paint this with a large brush, so you're forgetting the good ones, and that'll be like, change needs to happen. I feel for the victims, but it'll be not all Spartans, and that's the kind of way the system, the system's big stakeholders start to defend over time. And not all priests.
Yeah, and that's how this is allowed to continue and allowed to keep happening over and over again. At some point, you need to put a stop to it by making an example of one of these universities, and I would propose that Michigan State is the one that needs to happen too. Sorry, Michigan State alums.
Well, we will see. I'm sure that we will be revisiting this topic as, like I said, as we introduced it, new details, new facts, new news items are kind of hitting on the daily. So this will not be the only time that we check in. So be expecting more conversation of this going forward.
All right, guys.
Thanks.
All right,
All right, enjoy Super Bowl week.
Absolutely. You can catch me at DiscoQ at Twitter at DISCOQUE5. Have a great one.
At ChrisLarry33.
You can catch me at the Hogsty.
All right. See you in 2 weeks.
All right.